touring has always been a game where it's not just about selling tickets, it's about selling merch. And if your merch is priced correctly and the cost per unit is at the right spot, that sometimes saves an entire tour. I just got off one not too long ago where we were projected to be absolutely in the red by the end of the tour, no matter what we did. But at the end, we cleared by a landslide based on just merch numbers.
What's up, guys? Happy Thursday. I am back from Austria, back in the full swing of things. That trip was a much needed break before I have a tough few months ahead of me. I told you guys a couple weeks ago, my dog Romeo, we found out he's heartworm positive, and the treatment is insanely intense. There's a lot of medications, a lot of injections, and he has to be calm the entire time, so pretty much on crate rest. I got giant crates for every room in my house, and the aesthetics of it are killing me, but we got to do what we got to do. My dog does not know how to walk. He literally went from birth to straight to running. And so crate rest is, it's been interesting, but it's nothing we can't overcome. And it just means more time for me at home with him and producing content for you guys. So let's get into this episode. This is a little full circle moment for me. My guest today is Max Pohlmann. He is a touring manager extraordinaire. He's the co-founder of artist management company Audisbliss, and he's so much more. He's worked with artists like Subtronics, Autographs, on Holo, LS Dream, and even Coldplay. Yes, that Coldplay. He's been in the belly of the beast for festivals like Spring Awakening, Riot Fest, Rolling Loud, so many. Name a job in this industry, he's done it. And it's a full circle moment because I've actually known him for over a decade because we went to Illinois State University together. So I reached out to Max because one of you guys messaged me and asked me to do an episode on how to make the jump from a local artist to a touring one. And I knew Max would be perfect for this. So if you've been thinking about how to make that jump and what goes into building a tour, then this episode is for you. So take a listen and share with someone who you also think might benefit. I am so excited that you're finally joining me. I've known you for a very long time. Professionally and non-professionally, you are a touring and events professional, you are a serial entrepreneur, and you have so much wisdom to bestow to my audience. So thank you for being here. My audience,
it's great to be here with you.
It's really exciting. So before we jump in, I want to know from you, if artists truly listen to what you say, truly get to heart today, how might their careers change?
Honestly, it's a really great way to start this interview off. Something that I notice a lot and I've been thinking about deeply when I'm speaking with clients or anyone that I work with is, again, why would you hire somebody, for instance, like a touring professional or someone in your cabinet, direct and management, someone production manager, your even the people you choose as like a label representative or your agent. Why would you hire that person and then not listen to them is a better question, right? Oftentimes we see in the industry, artists will butt heads or clients will butt heads in different types of industries, comedians, et cetera, this stuff too, will butt heads with their direct team, almost as if it's a knee-jerk reaction that they have to do it, right? Almost like how we do sometimes prove ourselves in the corporate side of the world, right? Where if you don't disagree a little bit, then you're not adding to the conversation. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important that you choose the people that you think you need to listen to right away to be a part of your team, and then value and respect what they do say to you when the time comes, right? So to go back to your actual question, if you listen to the people that you employ to work with you and they have shown the experience, they've shown the love, they've shown the care for your project, your life will change because you're being supported by multiple minds and multiple subsets, right? So if we're all working together to build a project and everyone's success is contingent on your project being successful, they're probably only going to be trying to give you advice that benefits you, right? Either makes you financially more successful, makes you artistically more successful. You know, there's all these different avenues of different team members and what their jobs are to be able to deliver that. So that's my take on it. I mean, if you listen to the people that are actually in your court working for you and take those opinions very strictly and make sure that you're actually paying attention to their true words and verbiage and diction of how they're putting things together for you, then it will change your career. Now, it's important to still be a little skeptical sometimes, but at the same time, it's more important to actually confidently trust the people that you keep around you.
Yeah, and so while it sounds like one of the hats you wear is managing the sensitivities of artists, that's got to be a challenge. But before we get too much further, tell me all the different things you do. You did send me your resume yesterday, and I was like, this is the most insane resume I've ever seen, like in the best way. You've had your hands in so many different projects. So what is it exactly that you do for artists?
Yeah, I don't even do this very often, even interviewing about myself. I've been around for a long time now, about a decade doing these different jobs. I have a list of, I would say, 36 roles that I've done inside of this industry. Primarily, I focus on tour management, production management, artist management, and then festival operations stuff, right? Like production and operation things for festivals. But where all that's gone to now at this point is being more of a consultant, helping other teams figure out how to lead their teams properly, and jumping in where I can put my mental acuity now and my wisdom to best use, right? So honestly, again, if we could spend almost the entire interview just talking about every little job and how that's affected the way that I view things. My goal from the very beginning, before I realized that I didn't really want to be a festival director, was to do every single job under the sun in this industry so I would be able to effectively communicate with team members about what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
If I'm talking to an audio guy, I want to be able to speak his language. If I'm talking to my lighting professional, I want to be able to speak his language. If I'm talking video, which is my real role, then I want to be able to speak that person's language. If we're talking to an operations assistant, an AR, artist relations person on site, if we're talking to production managers or stage managers, like I want to know what they're going through before I even have that conversation with them. Old school stuff that I learned from my grandfather, who was a really great businessman, and he taught me that, that's important to be in everyone's shoes.
All the artists I talk to say the same, like before you hire someone to edit your video, learn how to know the baseline of things, because then you know how to communicate, like you said, and you know when you're getting screwed over. You're like, hey, wait a minute. Like if you don't know anything, like about whatever it is, it's about video editing, social media, branding, like you don't know if what that person is telling you is the truth. And so I think that's super important. And I know you've worked with not just the dance music industry, but I saw Coldplay on your resume.
Right. So Coldplay was with 070 Shake, who's one of my clients. Was lucky enough that she got me onto that tour with them as a support role. So we were able to work alongside the Coldplay team for a myriad of dates. Wow. Through their North American tour, which was really eye-opening for me. Honestly, I hadn't had many chances to go up to the stadium level to even produce a support act. Yeah. Right? It definitely inspired me to look at bigger teams to work with and things to do, because once I saw the magic kind of happening on that level, you realize that's the same level it is for every one of those arena acts, those stadium acts, right? Beyonce, it's all the same teams. It's all remotely the same people, very small industry at that point.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool to be able to even now, since that was dated in April, now I've had even more time on the road since then, getting to jump in and out of stuff and go look at more teams to work with. But that's been a whole thing about my life too. Even though we founded, my partners and I all founded Audisbliss as a team to be able to do management, work on some events, work on production. I never stopped freelancing. I've been working for many other teams. Sometimes that's difficult politically, especially like having artist managers be around your tour managing clients or whatever it is, right? It can get a little weird sometimes, but we've tried to set the boundaries. We've learned how to set boundaries over time with the clients, and that really has been probably the most important thing about my career, is still staying active in other people's worlds and working inside of other teams to be able to see how they're doing things too. Not just to better my own stuff, but also just to, again, just generally learn. Because that's one of the more difficult things about when you don't work for anybody and start a company when you come out of college. You actually didn't pick up anyone else's advice first.
Yeah, wow, that's a great point. I didn't think about that. And I've heard this new term. I don't know if it's going to catch on, because I'm a consultant too in my world, and some people say freelancer, and I don't have a negative connotation with that word. This is just a side note, but I've heard people calling it now a portfolio career, which I really like because it's like
lovely way to put it.
It is. I think it sounds a little fancier. You're working on project by project, and you're able to kind of flow to one thing or the other that, whatever tickles your fancy. So in the dance music world, can you just tell me, just to because I know your credibility, but establish that for me. Talk to me about some of the dance music artists you've worked with.
Yeah, so I think there would be, I'd be completely wrong to not mention Subtronics for 4 years at the beginning of my career on touring. That was during the time where he was starting he had already been touring for years, actually, frankly, but starting his more like bus and self-driven independent shows, building his own audience, really getting it going. And that was starting off in like 2017, and that carried on until 2021. So those tours were definitely ones where I learned a ton, learned my worth, also learned, how to manage other people, how to work within a team. Goes without saying, 2020 put us all through the ringer, but during that time period, we were doing a lot of drive-ins. We were moving from show to show. I did over, I think, while I hosted my own drive-in series here in the city, there was a point where I did I was involved in 130 shows within a 4-month period, technically doing 2 a day in some ways.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and so it was really a weird time, again, to be so active when nobody else was. That was an odd part of it. But also just having to deal with the politics during that time too, kind of made me even realize what type of person I wanted to be in the industry after all that. Because when you're running around during the pandemic, you're Darth Vader. Every single time you enter a room, it had to be is all this stuff happening or we can't do this show? Yeah. Whereas then later on now, coming out of that in 2021, 2022, I try to lead just with a whole different type of kindness. Again, looking at promoters as people that are barely getting by sometimes, especially independent promoters, very difficult job to even gamble correctly on the right artists to be able to produce a show, right? For sure. So I think that the faith those guys have is you owe them a lot more kindness on the front end, when you're coming in to get a show done, even if you're trying to stick up for your artist's rights and make sure that your artist gets the show they want, et cetera. You still have to also think about where their budget's at today, where their head's at today, how are ticket sales doing? All these things could be contributing to the way that things move around. So,
and that's one of the main pillars of this show is showing artists who are trying to make this a full-time career behind the curtain. What's the business side like? What's actually happening? Because it's very easy to point fingers. I mean, when I was a news reporter, it was very easy for me to point fingers at, the people in the ad department, or on the production side. And so this is I'm trying to bridge that gap, take down that wall so people can all understand each other a little bit better. And so that's what we're gonna get into.
A noble goal.
Yeah. Thank you. Because I feel like I'm both. I'm a creative, but I'm a business owner. And so I fight with myself sometimes. And I know that certain decisions are made and it's just business and it's nothing more than that. I complain to my brother all the time. And then I'm like, what am I doing? I know better, but you get stuck in that loop.
Admittedly, Jonah's really good at dealing with complaining. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I definitely unleash on him from time to time. Okay, before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to ask you about it's probably not a hot take to you, but on Twitter, there's been some discourse about what constitutes a tour, which I think is so funny. You see people put up flyers, and it'll be 5 venues in their home state. They're going to this college and that. Is that a tour, in your opinion?
I think if you're having this conversation, you've got too much time on your hands to begin with. So I would say that whatever someone wants to call a tour is a tour to them. Right? If you're touring a 5-show radius within 100 miles of each other and it's still taking time for you to come up with assets, build, graphics for your shows, get your promotion in line, make sure these shows sell, especially as an independent or a small artist, that is touring. Yeah. Yes, that is touring. So it's I don't think that obviously there's different levels of touring, and we can talk about A, B, and C level touring, D level touring. I have different categories I put these things into, but to be frank, I think that sort of conversation, this is that stuff that has gotten me to be Twitterless Maximus for a very long time, is that there's a lot of time-wasting conversations that people do about, semantics, is this a tour, is this not a tour? Again, if it's costing you effort, logistics, all these things that are normal for shows to be put together and strung together into a subset, then it's a tour. So
yeah, that's okay. It doesn't matter if you're sleeping at home or not.
Or not. No. And I mean, gosh, if it could always be that way, you know, if I could always go back home every night, if I could always go home every night, then it'd be a lot easier to do my job.
But 100%.
Yeah, I wish it was that way. But so if you're, I mean, sure, it could be this badge of honor situation, which definitely happens in all parts of the industry, people talking about like who's got it worse. But, you know, I mean, frankly, the truth is that if you're having to prepare for shows and there are run on, you know, a list of shows that you've got together, then I think it's a tour. You know, again, we can play the game of poking at each other, but in all fairness, it's a tour.
Yeah. That's just wasted energy. So I know there's not one right way to build a tour, but the question that sparked this episode and me reaching out to you was someone sent me a DM asking, how can an artist go from a local act to touring? And so in your opinion, do they need to master something at home first? Or can they automatically reach for the stars and try to get on some supporting acts in other cities? Is there a formula for it?
There's certainly not one formula for it, to be completely frank. It depends so much on the individual. Remember, this is like an individual sport. You know, like when it comes to these guys becoming, especially DJs, especially in the dance music industry, right? I mean, this isn't typically bands, 4 or 5 people working together. It's typically one guy or maybe 2, plus a team of people that are behind the scenes making sure this gets going, right? And so if you're starting from ground zero, no management, nothing, no team around you, and you're trying to go from being, you know, a potentially local DJ, open slot guy, maybe just a bedroom producer, and you have dreams of becoming a touring act later on in your life, you know, there's incremental steps I think that everybody does have to take, which would definitely be to get a team around you, create worth through your art. And when I say that, that means if you're a DJ and that's what you do, if you're a selector and you're out playing even local bars and stuff like that, start to create a rate system that makes you actually profitable so you can hire people into your team, right? And then past that though, if you're a bedroom producer or you're a studio producer, or, you know, the idea being that you're trying to be a DJ producer, you want to make music and play it out, your worth is in your music. You know, and at the end of the day, that's what's going to start to get you going. You know, the things that step back in, and I would say that any of my management colleagues would agree with this one, is that you have to be able to also view it as you're an entertainer. You have to keep up with social media. You have to keep up with all these things that are brutally difficult for someone even like me to even want to even think about doing, right? And I can imagine that being that way for a lot of people that just want to make the music, just want to do the art. But the thing is that it's unfortunately way more than that, you know, and to be someone that's able to sell tickets in multiple markets, you have to be known as a personality a little bit as well as being, I would say it's like, you know, 70-30. Like your music can do all the work for the most part. And if you put in even half the effort you put into on music, back into social media and back into being an entertainer, then you're going to see so much fruit from that labor, right?
Absolutely.
Like that's a huge part of this. And I think that's been a thing that I've noticed with, I would say at least 25 artists I've been adjacent to, has been they always struggle to some extent, even if they're really good at it. They always struggle on listening to like posting on the socials, getting a couple stories up.
Because it never ends. It's just like
it's really laborious.
Yeah,
it's taxing.
Yeah. But the thing is, and this is what I consult on, is personal brands. If people can find a reason to connect with you outside of the music, that is just one more chip in the basket for them to want to come see you.
Right.
You know, like I know that I personally connect with artists that have some sort of personality. Now, the other thing that you can do, in my opinion, is have, you know, $1 million production budget, right? And put on like crazy visuals and, you know, do
where are you getting,
Prince Hollow.
Exactly.
So if you can't do that, you're going to have a personality.
Exactly. I mean, there are cases of artists taking in investments and stuff like that too to really get to a certain point in their career. Sometimes people think those are actually like industry plants. I mean, sometimes just enough finance on the back end of good music can create a project pretty quickly.
Sure. And you can find it, anyone can find an investor. That's just a whole different game.
A whole different game and a whole different style of project, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, then you have other people to answer to, you've got all that stuff. And if you look at other mediums of art, you know, in the, you know, again, in like a painter, for instance, or anyone that would do any physical artwork like that, you're going to see any visual art, even on the 3D side or something like that too, you're going to see that is typically driven potentially through investment, because the amount of people, crew that it takes to produce a 3D element or something like that too can be a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's definitely a good way to spin it. I would want to give your audience the perspective that yes, it's an incremental thing, and sure, there is a step-by-step to some extent to getting to being a touring musician, but it's so on the artist. You know, a while back, we, as a management team even, we really started to readopt the tool that when we start to speak to an artist or client, we hear what they need done, where they're at, or what they want to accomplish, and then we fully define ourselves as an aid, as a supplement, as a tool, a resource for them to get there. I think very oftentimes too, a lot of younger producers, and younger I mean by experience, not in age, will certainly try to drive the conversation saying like, if I get this team, this will happen. It's like, no.
Yeah.
No team can work with nothing, right? So the idea being that like, if you're not putting in 300%, don't expect your, I hate to say it this way, but almost like employees, to put in as much, even close to what you're putting in. I mean, in any business, we know that, right? Like if I can hire somebody and I can delegate something to them and they can do 70% or better at that job, I'm probably cool with them doing it, right? And that's the same way it is with management. I mean, they have other clients, maybe their own lives to deal with, et cetera. Like, they're not going to be as invested in your project as you are in your project. And that's why it always has to be, the bar has to be set so high.
Well, and managers aren't interested in people who aren't showing that investment in themselves.
Right.
I have an episode coming out this week with Corinne Burrows from Midas Touch, and I asked her, what do you look for in a manager or in a client? And she said, I want to see you be obsessed with your project. That's like an indication to me that you are going to work as hard.
Yeah, I think we would all agree with that.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense. So don't even think that you're going to, just be able to sit back and rest on your laurels because you have these people helping you.
And even me, when I'm freelancing or even on contract to somebody, touring with them for a long period of time, investing in their project over years, my time at least.
Yeah.
That's the same thing I look for. I mean, I don't typically attach myself to somebody that is kind of wavy on their commitment to their project.
It's too risky now. There's too much good talent out there. You need someone who's going to be a workhorse. It's not like, I wasn't, in the music industry back then, but it's crazy because I watched my stupid show that I watch on the treadmill is Real Housewives. It's my guilty pleasure. And one of the Real Housewives, her name is Candy Burris. She was in this group called Escape. She wrote all of TLC's songs. And I saw a clip from her in 2008 saying, it's crazy. These labels don't want to discover people anymore. They just want you to come in a ready-made package. And she was saying that in 2008. So what do you think it is now? It's like amplified times a million. And so it's not like discovering Mariah Carey or you have to put yourself in the position to be discovered.
It's definitely a lot different than the CD days or the record days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different industry nowadays. You can publish your own stuff. You can work with monthly subscription models to be able to get your music out. It's a hobbyist industry. You can come in without any intent of being a professional at this job at this point as far as making music. You can do it for therapy. You can do it for a myriad of reasons, right?
Sure.
The idea being, though, is that then to get out of that pool of people, one must push themselves to be a business.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's definitely right brain, left brain stuff. I still make music for myself even, for instance. And it's like, when I think about that, if I ever wanted to take that super seriously or add that to my list right now, I would need to put 300% of my effort into getting that done. I know how much it takes, right? It's where, on the other end, you look at people that do think that once they've created a platform as well, they can let it coast.
Yeah. No.
Going back to the people I mentioned at the start of the interview, like, they don't stop going. These guys don't give up. It's a constant redoubling down, a constant exploration of growth, constant, what can I do to redefine the way that I'm doing this? How can I, elevate my project, right? And they don't give up on that. That's why they become superstars. That's why they're really good at their jobs, right? It's the same thing with me. If I was just completely lame and didn't go out and try to up my skills or do anything on my own, I would be stagnant too. So I think stagnation is definitely something that I think artists get worried about, falling off these sort of terms. Again, it's all effort based. If you keep up the effort and you're putting in enough work, especially on socials and in your music, those two mediums will probably get you quite a good distance before you actually get picked up and are able to move along.
It's a good reminder. Yeah. Everyone needs to hear that because it really is a mental. It's a mind fuck being in the industry. It
helps to almost have a sports psychologist around you too, because there's days where you're not going to feel like you're able to do your job, and you should definitely have some people around you, whether that be mental health people or someone that specifically is there, like a sports psychologist, to talk to you about performing. I do recommend that to a lot of people now as well, because it's a very serious thing to actually deal with, right? Is that like some days you wake up and you're just like, I'm ugly, I can't do this, blah, blah, blah. And I think that a lot of artists go through that.
Yeah.
And so, again, without the proper resources and tools around them, they might have a whole month that goes by without getting anything done just because they got in a rut, right? And burnout is such a serious problem in the industry in general on everyone's jobs, that I think that you have to be wary of how hard you're pushing yourself, what your deadlines look like. But most importantly, once you set them, you got to stick to them. So you got to have tools in place to keep you moving, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't just like give up because you're not feeling well for a month. You have to start to push a little bit harder, figure out a way to actually get a resource for that. If you're, especially at these breaking points, like if this is your true dream, you've got to redouble down.
100%. One thing that I heard, I don't remember where I heard it or who said it, but I love the sentence, never negotiate with yourself. And I've taken that to heart, because it happens when I'm getting tired, when I'm getting weary, and it's like, ooh, should I cancel like my workout class today, or should I not wake up at this time, or should I just put off this work for tomorrow? And the second I start negotiating with myself, I know I'm in dangerous territory. And so that's something that I live by.
I mean, my go-to is get rid of maybe and get rid of try.
Yeah.
Those two words don't need to be in your vocabulary at all.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to do something, do it. If you're not going to do something, don't do it. It's that simple. So it's like if you're really trying to reprioritize your day or coming up with what's on the agenda for the next month, like consistently stick to the things that you said you will do, and don't play the game of like flip-flopping on trying or maybe. Yeah, it's so important. The mental fortitude you need to do this career, especially when you're touring. I mean, especially when this is going beyond just a show in your hometown, it's a lot. So I want to talk about pivoting a little bit, talking about the components of a tour, because there's one thing to put together a show. I talk to my brother, my friends all the time who like get to put together a lineup for one show, but it's a lot different when you're putting together a tour. So can you maybe walk me through, because I think this would be a fun exercise for people who are listening, like what are the components? Is it the branding that you have to do first? Is it the people you're going to bring with you? What are the different elements? So there's a ton of different hats that we could approach this conversation from, right?
High level.
From the management point of view, I would say that you're all encompassing a 360 creative project, right? The idea is that to get a tour up and running, you need to work with obviously a team, and this team needs to be comprised of agents, lawyers, your internal day-to-day team, maybe even marketing professionals, maybe like secondary and third tier third-party groups that might even be helping you with digital imprints, how you're going about putting your stuff up online, how you're going about being SEO optimized, all that.
Can I ask too? So because you said lawyers. Clarify, are these people that artists need to have on full time, or is this someone you can bring on a project basis?
In a perfect world, you have retainers with all these people, and I mean,
wow.
If it's not in a perfect world, again, once you've had a little bit of success either on the end of, a little bit is a very underwhelming answer on that one. I would say moderate level of success to be able to afford these people. You should have somebody that's able to look through your contracts, make sure that everything's been done the way that you'd like it to go. Especially for your first tour, it's make or break for a lot of people in the sense that if you were to like hemorrhage money on your first run, it's gonna be really hard to get up again, right? And mentally it doesn't help at all either, especially with guys when they're going out to do their first headline run. That's why normally we steer people into an idea of being a less is more approach on production and everything else like that too,
so
because
that
you don't want to
maybe,
see that happen.
Do you think about venue selection that way? What does this venue lend itself to so I can
this
spend less?
This is why your team's really important. Normally, in some cases, especially like the garage band style work, you might be the one choosing these venues. Like especially like the pop punk, like garage to garage touring style, which is honestly very pure. Then you're probably choosing the small little promoters you're working with to sell to 200 people a night or whatever it is, 100 people a night, and you're going out and doing this, which is why I said all levels of touring are touring, right? So it's like you're probably specifically thinking about what market you can go play in, what little guy has this garage, what guy has this spot. But when you get to like the level that I entered at, you typically have a team and you have agents and you have management and everybody else working together to make sure that these deals are right. So on the agent level, whether it be Wasserman, CAA or UTA or the myriad of other small miners and different types of agencies that there are out there for talent, the job of those people is to try to string together something that makes remote sense. There's a myriad amount of memes out there, right? Like a great collection of things about, doesn't make any sense when we're jumping from one side of the country to the other side of the country and back.
Yeah, right.
Right. And this is the things that are kind of distilled down into whether or not it's going to be a ground or an air tour, right? Are we going to be flying to everything? Or are we going to be on the ground? So if it's routed really nicely and you can actually string it together and do it by ground, the first step is to make sure that you've got the right promoters in the right venues. So once you've got that locked up, and typically that is going to be partly the artist paying attention to these deals and making sure they're okay with it. But this is where I was talking about with the trust thing. If someone's telling you that after 10 years of them doing their job and getting this up and running and putting you on the road here, if you chose that person and you like that person and you trust that person, you respect them at least, probably should respect them on the attitude that they have towards whether or not you're going to sell in that market, whether or not it's going to go well, be a little bit more optimistic, play it with the best foot forward, go for it. Right? I mean, again, the time is now when it comes to these sort of things. Like, it would be really horrible to like back off of a deal or say, let's cancel a myriad amount of these or a bunch of these shows because you're not feeling confident in your own project, right? So I think that when you're looking at these sort of things, it's like you're starting off with this high level team, and it really does just start off with the agent securing deals with talent buyers at these individual venues, coming up with what the promoters want and how can we distribute this across the market. Whether that be all the way up to Live Nation, AEG deals, et cetera, this sort of stuff, or all the way down to independents, right? But that's the start. Then after this all gets locked up and you've got that good to go, you need to come up with the tour ad mats. And how are we going to present this tour, right? Choosing a name for the tour, potentially building graphics, setting up a template for all of your art direction, going that route.
If it's like tied to a release, an album release, that's usually
very
easier,
easy.
you have something to tie it to.
But not everybody's album-based. Yeah. And so that's like a big thing too, right? Is that like there's a lot of DJs especially that are definitely not not album-based artists. They go on a tour, they go on a run, but it's not based on them coming out with an 8-song album. That's not their deal. So, again, when it's coming back to this, it's like you find a way to loop it all together. Maybe that's just the name of the artist. Maybe that's the album name, or maybe it's a name like a kooky name or some sort of fun name for the tour itself, right? And once that's all looped together, you're able to start approaching back into marketing and being able to actually speak to the promoters about how you're going to roll out the tour, right? Again, management steps back in, a lot of work, as now working with promoters to set times on when we're going on sale, when we're doing all that too, to be able to market these shows effectively. So
what's the timeline, by the way?
It can be very varying, right? In
ideal,
all hope, I think any promoter out there that would be listening to this would hope that I would say something well past 6 months when we're locking these deals and when we're even getting to the point of trying to go on sale. In some markets,
the artist has to also do the day-to-day, taking shows day-to-day.
Yeah.
So this is just an additional...
nobody likes putting up a show that's for 2 weeks from now, unless it's some huge act that is going to crush it, right? Nobody likes the risk of that. So the idea being that like the further far forward you can be on something, some of the best agents that I've worked with, they were shopping their tours well over a year and a half in advance, like a year in advance. They're getting everything lined up for a tour. Everything's already locked up. And by the time that we're actually pulling the trigger on the run, again, this has been already a discussion for 7 to 8 months. It's so far in advance. This is the signs of a healthy project. If everyone's firing on all cylinders, when you come out of a market that you just played, you're already looking to do a play there in another year, whenever it is again. Right. And so it depends on how that's selling and what that promoter's expecting from that market, when they need to go live. Like internationally, I just got back from Europe on a run with an artist, and like, depending on that country or the listenership and the audience in that country, they might want to go on sale a lot earlier than you would expect, because it just takes a little bit longer for things to trickle in. Right. So it really, this is why there's not really a one answer fits all situation to like, when do you go up with a tour or how do you do this? But to not speak anything past, what I should be speaking about when it comes to my expertise, I'd say that once you get past that marketing point, and get everything dialed in to be comfortable with the tour and what it's going to look like and how you're going to present it, then it's time to start thinking about the logistics of the tour, how you're going to get through every one of these stops. How are you going to produce these stops? Do you need to hire a production manager? Do you need a tour manager for your job? Not all artists need these people.
And that's my head's spinning.
Yeah, but not all artists need these people. Sometimes you need, depending on your act, maybe you've got a really interesting backline setup, backline being, instruments and stuff that you need to put on stage. Maybe you need to hire a backline tech that's specifically just going to look at the backline, right? Maybe you need a guitar tech, because you're doing a lot of guitars, like it's normal touring. Typically your audio guys will jump in to help out with a lot of these different things, depending on your setup, drum, mics, et cetera, these sort of things, if you're going on tour with instruments. But as you can see, this starts to build out really fast, and that's just on one sector. Then we have like lighting. Later on, you might have a couple lighting techs, as well as the guy that is actually doing the lighting, the LD, right? So you have, again, potentially 3 to 4 people in these positions per per zone, per area of a production, if you're going all the way to having lighting, video, and your own audio at a tour. So if you dial that all the way back to like the start of a tour and when someone's trying to jump from going from nothing to something here, again, typically it starts off with one guy that's really willing to wear a lot of hats to get them up and moving, which I've done for a lot of people.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's lots of people like that.
Yeah, and so, I mean,
because you have to be in this data, you have to know more than one skill.
Yeah, but that being said, I think it's important to get out there that people need to be a little bit more realistic with their expectations of people that are all-in-ones. It's also on the all-in-ones to not be saying that they can take more than they can handle. But I would say that it's a whole thing that when people are on the road, it's great when you have somebody that has a decade of experience on the road with you for a first-time run and can speak every language to everybody and get the show done. But there's not too many people like that are really willing to travel for it at this point, frankly, especially after 2020's cull of the market and all that sort of stuff too. But then on top of that, you have a lot of guys that are just good enough at doing at least 2 of those jobs or 3 of those jobs, right? And they need opportunities as well. So it's all about fitting what works for you inside of your rate schedules, what you can afford to pay somebody, making sure you can hit those numbers, making sure they feel valued, and keeping them happy while they're on the road too. I think that's kind of a point of this as well. When you're on the road, you're partners. It's not really like once you're out there, and you're on a bus with, I would say any team would probably agree with this. We all have bosses and we all have someone that says something to us where it's a yes or a no to that person, right? There's someone to answer to. But when you're out on the road and it's been a couple weeks have gone by, a couple months have gone by in a tour bus, you're feeling more like partners at that point when you're getting the stuff done. It's very familial feeling of work.
Sure, and I think that it also comes with the other side of it is traveling with people can be annoying as fuck.
Hell yeah, it can.
So you really get to know people and you have to figure out how you mesh.
Yeah, touring etiquette is a big deal.
Yeah.
And learning how to be on a bus without everyone hating you is definitely a big deal.
God, that gives me anxiety thinking about it. So 2 more questions for you. If you had to pick one trait, because let me back up. You've seen artists go from local to touring.
Absolutely.
In your decade plus. What is the one trait they all have that have taken them from A to B?
It's not just one person said this to me, but I would say there's been a bunch of successful artists that have actually said the exact same words to answer this question, which would be, you better have some charisma. I mean, it's got to be there when you're working with a team and when you're working with a lot of people and you're trying to connect with fans. It's really hard to be super introverted in that situation, right? Wow. I mean, you have to at least figure out how to be able to stomach being a bit of an extrovert, being able, again, to be this entertainer that can speak to your team and be a little larger than life sometimes to lead. Think of it. I mean, just because you're artistically inclined and you're working all the time on your own in the studio doesn't mean that you need to have a little bit of leadership quality, right, to be able to be out there and working with a team of people.
Wow.
And if you don't, then someone else has to be able to do that. So then you need to give all that to your management or someone else to be able to deal with it. But you can't one or the other. It needs to be one or the other, right? Either you're a leader on the road and you're working with your team and you're making them feel comfortable and empowering them to get their jobs done with you, or you leave that to somebody else entirely. So for a lot of people, I've always been the one that would do that as the tour manager, as the production manager. I handle all those responsibilities of leaders, and then I'm a technical director to the artist, right? I'm speaking directly to them about why we're doing it this way, why we're doing it that way. A lot of liability on my hands with that and making sure people see what they want, get what they want out of a show. But that's the way that I've found the ground for those artists that don't want to be that leader to their people, right? But I've also met some other ones that are very headstrong about that. They're totally cool with being the guy that will speak to people. Let's say they don't like the way the lighting was tonight. They come up directly to the lighting, the LD, and tell them they don't like it, or the VJ and tell them they don't like it, or what they think they need to constructively do,
right?
Which is also important to get it to be better, right? And again, I think that's also a whole thing too. In this day and age right now, we're seeing a really weird turnover in touring. It's always been this way to some extent, but I think it's a little bit more extreme right now, where people sometimes think it's we can replace that guy, we can get another guy for this, we can do that. Hiring and firing in this industry is just as difficult as it is in any other industry. You do not want to have to uproot people if you don't have to. So that's why there is a level of trying to coach, trying to learn with each other, and trying to get people to get things done too.
I running the small operation I have, God forbid I ever lose any of my people. I will spiral because you invest a lot into getting people to understand your brand, how you work, your quirks. And when you build that trust, it's a beautiful thing. And then having to train someone new, I just had to do it with one of my clients. I had to uproot a whole marketing team. It wasn't my choice. It was my client's choice, and I was the liaison. And that was like struggle city. So yeah, that's such a great point to bring up. And I love what you said about leadership. I wasn't expecting that answer, and that's the soundbite right there. So you kind of were just getting into this already, but my last question for you is like, what is the future of touring for artists as costs rise? How do we make this career sustainable and attainable for DJs?
I wish I had a concise answer for you on that one. Obviously, it's a not just a nationwide industry problem; it's a world industry problem right now. Rising costs in general, inflation in many countries, not just in our own, is causing things to be not very sustainable. I mean, even hotels, flights, all these like simple things that we have to pay for no matter what to get our jobs done, it's rising. And every year we're factoring like 30 to 20%. I know like inflation numbers are certain things in certain industries that are getting gouged, travel especially. You need to think like 20 to 30% of increased costs right now when it comes to these tickets, these airfare tickets. So yeah, it's a little ridiculous. I mean, the way that we get around that sometimes is by trying to go back to ground touring, but ground touring is also extremely expensive.
Sure, gas.
Yeah, but also the way that, I would say bus drivers have started to realize their worth inside of the whole situation too, which they always have known. But bus companies as well. And when you're going to book these sort of larger vehicles to do ground tours, are realizing that they have a lot more that they can bargain with if they want to. And so you're ending up in a situation too where just getting the budget off the ground to be able to reserve a bus and get everything moving is looking a lot more steep. Now, who does that get passed to? Right? It gets passed to the fans, gets passed to the audience, because without them paying higher prices in tickets, we can't afford to do this. I mean, different entities, regardless of how you feel about them, have different incentives for touring with them too. I mean, there's certain larger corporations that have sweeter deals for artists to be able to go on the road by running an entire tour with them. And I think that's, it's nice to see because it's helping us make sure that we can actually put things back out on the road. But it depends on where it's so dependent on where the artist is at, right? I mean, if you've already had a project for 8 years, you're going on your like 12th time touring, 14th time touring, you've already got a full team, everything's budgeted, you already know where you're at. It's easier to figure out where you need to trim to get that thing up and running. But yeah, feel bad for the guys that are trying to enter right now. It's not cheap. So when you're trying to build these new teams and get this stuff going, I mean, I think management teams especially always know the burden of this, trying to get somebody to where they're going to make what they need to make off the tour. I'm not just talking about breaking even, but get to where they need to get.
Yeah.
That's always the hard part. And learned from one of my first great mentors that sometimes that comes down to merch, which I would say it almost always has.
Invest.
It's always been a game where it's not just about selling tickets, it's about selling merch. And if your merch is priced correctly and the cost per unit is at the right spot, that sometimes saves an entire tour. I just got off one not too long ago where we were projected to be absolutely in the red by the end of the tour, no matter what we did. But at the end, we cleared by a landslide based on just merch numbers.
Whoa,
right?
Yeah.
It's like that is something that a lot of guys don't understand. And sometimes that can be quality, right? Like, so really quality merch will drive sales, but not all audiences can buy super quality pieces, right? So it's either sometimes just the Gildan t-shirts, $20 a pop, whatever it is, or it's super nice, great thread count crew neck sweaters, and
it's got to be something people want to wear.
It's got to be something
cool. It can't just be your name on it.
One important piece to the touring aspect that we almost just left out of the conversation, I'm glad I came back to it, was that merch drives this. Like, a lot of the times it'll actually be the thing that picked up all the logistics costs for the tour, if it's done correctly. So it's definitely a great unlocking tool, but you have to be able to sell your merch. So
consumerism.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, these are listen. Touring is baseline a very consumer-driven situation, right? And I mean, even with, for instance, Coldplay and what I watched them do on their initiatives, there's a lot of talk right now about how to make it more sustainable, how to be able to like do touring without just being super wasteful all the time. And again, the problem with touring in a long shot is that everything is very disposable, everything's very quick. We have to make it through all these markets really fast. It's all very time-based. But again, one thing that helps with the offset of all those things financially can certainly be, your merch drive, as well as your latent song drive. Anything that you're getting off your songs and anything that you're doing in passive income situations while being on tour is what can potentially keep you in a good place, even if your tour does not do well.
Wow. This has been, I could talk to you for hours about this. This has been incredibly insightful. You've said some things. This is episode, I think, 70 or 71 that nobody has ever said before. I've interviewed lots of people, so thank you.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me out.
Wow, we definitely need to do a part 2 with Max because he has a lot more to say about this industry that you need to hear. When I asked him, like, what's one quality all touring artists have, and he said leadership skills, it took my breath away because I really didn't think about that. Honestly, I didn't. Like, I thought maybe he'd say something logistical or about like a milestone you have to reach, but no, it's all about how you show up on and off the field being the decks performing, and, you know, off the field being how you are behind the scenes with a team. Every superstar has leadership skills. All of them. I know that's a big thing they teach in sports. I don't know jack shit about sports, but I do know that. So I really loved that answer. That was awesome. Now, I invited Max to come to Chicago Music Nexus so you guys can talk to him and people like him. Chicago Music Nexus is the only place currently in Chicago where networking in the dance music industry is accepted and encouraged. You guys can't do this at the club. You can't do it at a festival. It's weird. It's awkward. People are busy. They don't have time for it. But Chicago Music Nexus, they do. And that is why we've invited these industry pros so you can have direct access to them. We are getting so close to the event. You guys, I've been working on this for over a year. I can't believe it's finally happening. If I think about that too much, I'm going to get hives because there's still so much left to do. Finalizing caterers, getting all the bartenders in order. We have an amazing event for you guys, and I'm so excited for you to have this opportunity to meet with other industry professionals. So the code podcast still gets you $30 off your tickets. ChicagoMusicNexus.com is where you buy it. I'll put it in the show notes, and I hope to see you there. And I'll talk to you next week.